What if I told you that the United States could pull its troops back, save money in the short term, make a lot of people feel good politically, and at the same time guarantee bigger wars, higher defense costs, and greater nuclear risk down the road? Because that's the part nobody wants to talk about. People here bring the troops home and assume it means peace, stability, and savings. In reality, it often means the exact opposite, just delayed. And once you understand how the system actually works, you start to see why the current US military footprint looks the way it does, and why dismantling it would be far more dangerous than most people realize. Hi, I'm Mark. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your name and city in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, it really helps me make more interesting content. Now, let's get back to the topic. There's been a lot of speculation lately about whether recent US actions abroad signal a broader retreat from the world. Are we disengaging from the Eastern Hemisphere? Are overseas bases on the chopping block? Is this the beginning of a more isolationist era? The short answer is no, and the long answer is that the entire global security structure depends on the US doing the exact opposite of what isolationists argue for. To understand why, you first need to strip away the myths about American military power and look at the actual numbers. Most people imagine the United States as having a massive, sprawling army spread across the planet, occupying dozens of countries and draining endless resources. That image is outdated. Today, the US has fewer troops stationed overseas than at any time since World War II, if you exclude the temporary surge during the War on Terror. We're talking about roughly 100,000 troops total, and the overwhelming majority of them are concentrated in just three places: Japan, Germany, and South Korea. Outside of those locations, the US presence is minimal. Small naval facilities, logistics hubs, support units, nothing resembling an imperial occupation force. This isn't excess, it's precision. Japan is the first and most important pillar of this system. It's not just another base, it's the anchor of American power in the Pacific. Because of the way the islands are positioned, Japan allows the US to influence the western third of the Pacific Ocean and the Asian mainland beyond it. If the United States walked away from Japan, it wouldn't simply be closing a base, it would be surrendering strategic access to an entire region that includes Korea, Taiwan, Southeast Asia, China, and Australia. Walking away wouldn't make the region more peaceful. It would allow power to consolidate naturally, a new regional hegemon to emerge, and history tells us exactly how that story ends. The last time the US disengaged from Asian security, it was followed by the rise of Imperial Japan and eventually World War II. Retreat doesn't eliminate conflict. It postpones it and magnifies it. Germany plays a very different but equally critical role. Germany is the largest economy in Europe, the most populous major state, and it sits right in the center of the continent. Every time Germany has been left to fully manage its own security environment, Europe has eventually found itself on the road to catastrophe. That's not an insult, it's a structural reality. Power combined with geography creates pressure, and pressure creates expansion. By stationing roughly 30,000 US troops in Germany, none of them near an active front line, the United States effectively stabilizes an entire continent. It prevents arms races, discourages unilateral military doctrines, and keeps nuclear escalation in check. And it does all of that at a remarkably low cost. The alternative isn't neutrality. The alternative is a heavily rearmed Europe, fragmented security policies, and a return to the dynamics that produced two world wars. South Korea completes the triangle. The US presence on the Korean peninsula is one of the cheapest insurance policies against nuclear catastrophe ever devised. If American troops were withdrawn, the likelihood of conflict between North and South Korea would rise dramatically. South Korea would have little choice but to pursue nuclear weapons. Japan would follow, China would react, and suddenly, a contained threat becomes a multi-state nuclear standoff. North Korea already has missiles capable of reaching US cities, and defending against that threat from the American mainland would cost exponentially more than maintaining 20 to 25,000 troops on the peninsula. Again, this isn't ideology. its cost-benefit analysis. Here's where most discussions completely fall apart. People assume that other countries can simply step in and replace the United States if it withdraws. In reality, projecting military power thousands of miles from home is one of the most difficult things a state can do. It requires specialized logistics, massive transport capacity, global basing rights, and decades of institutional experience. In modern history, only two empires ever managed it successfully before the United States: the British Empire and the Japanese Empire. The US learned from both. Today, no other country operates at that level, not because they lack ambition, but because the system the US built made it unnecessary. America paid for global security, and everyone else benefited without having to build the same capabilities. If the United States were to withdraw from the Eastern Hemisphere, that wouldn't mean peace. It would force countries like Japan, Britain, and others to rebuild global power projection capabilities from scratch. That process wouldn't take a few years. It would take generations. And the world that emerges on the other side wouldn't be stable. It would look a lot like the late 1920s. Multiple rising powers, overlapping security zones, increasing competition, and no clear arbiter to prevent escalation. The last time the world looked like that, the cost was measured in tens of millions of lives. China is often cited as proof that the US role is becoming obsolete, but that argument collapses under scrutiny. Yes, China has built a large navy, and yes, it has around 50 ships capable of operating far from its shores. What it lacks is reliable basing and genuine allies. Instead, China relies on a fragile network of friendly ports and commercial access agreements stretching from Southeast Asia to the Indian Ocean. This so-called string of pearls works in peacetime, but in a real conflict, it's extremely vulnerable. If even one link breaks, Chinese ships beyond that point are effectively stranded. The US Navy is built to fight its way out of trouble. China's, in many cases, is not. Russia presents a different picture. Russia isn't a true naval or air power, and its space capabilities are steadily eroding. What it does have is a massive ground army, which is terrifying if you share a border with it. Beyond that border, its ability to project power drops sharply. Its fleets are divided across the Black Sea, the Baltic, the Arctic, and the Pacific, each constrained by geography and hostile choke points. Even if Russia could somehow concentrate its naval forces, which it can't, those fleets would still face superior powers at every exit. Russia's exposure is vast. Its reach is limited. When you step back and look at the entire picture, something becomes very clear. The current US military footprint isn't bloated or reckless. It's almost perfectly optimized. It minimizes cost, minimizes casualties, and maximizes strategic control. Pulling back doesn't save money in the long run. It guarantees higher defense spending later. It doesn't reduce risk. It pushes risk forward in time, where it becomes harder, more expensive, and far more dangerous to manage. Isolation sounds appealing. Disengagement feels responsible. But history is brutally consistent on this point. When the United States steps back completely, the world doesn't become calmer. It becomes more competitive, more unstable, and eventually more violent. And when America is finally forced to return, the price is always far higher than what it tried to avoid in the first place.